So I want to welcome everybody who's participating in these two webinars that the county is doing today. We have a strong desire to keep connected to our communities and to involve the communities in where this county goes. We like community-driven efforts, and we put a big effort into making sure that happens. We have Impact Passaic, which someone can explain to at some point also, which has been doing remarkable work. We did a needs assessment for our human services, and the county does business in the county. So two things. We have Matt Jordan, who is our chief counsel, is going to go over our procurement procedures and what the law is and what's necessary to apply for grants that the county may be giving out and bids and things like that. And it can be daunting. There's a lot of paperwork that are sort of pro forma, but Matt will go over all that with you. And then after Matt is done, there'll be questions and answers for a period of time. And then Francince, who is our Deputy Human Services Director, is going to go over everything that we give out in our Human Services Office. That's a lot of our programs come out of that department. And we want you to be aware of what we fund, how we fund it, what the RFQ and RFP processes are, and we're going to go from there. We appreciate everybody that's on. We right now have 84 participants. That's pretty good. We looked at faith-based and nonprofits, and our goal here is to have more community involvement. I'm a firm believer that programs should be handled by the community, people that are best suited to deal with the problems that we have locally are the people dealing with them every day, in the field. So that's why this is important, what we're doing today. We want to bring more people in and have them have the ability to participate more forcefully with the County of Passaic. So I'm going to get off myself now because I have Board of Social Services duties, but I'm going to introduce our Chief Counsel, Matt Jordan, who's going to now go over the procurement procedures, as I stated. At the end of Francine's talk, there'll also be questions and answers. We're doing that so we can fully answer any questions you have on either webinar, and then they will be removed, but the rest of the webinar will be up on the county website if you want a refresher course. So anyway, thank you all very much for participating. This is very exciting to me. I think we're going in the right direction, and this is going to help enormously. Thank you all. Matt, it is all yours, and I'm going to get off.
Thank you, Commissioner James. Just everyone give me a second so I can share my screen here.
Okay.
All right, can everyone see my screen? I don't know, Ron, are we good?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
All right, good morning, everyone. As everyone said, my name is Matthew Jordan. I'm the Passaic County Counsel. I run the law department for the county. And sherrya Arvanitakis, she is our purchasing agent. She does send her regrets. She helped me put together this presentation. We usually do these together. She is dealing with a personal issue and couldn't be with us this morning. So this is just a quick agenda of the things I'm going to go over. The local public contracts law, requirements for respondents, how we award a contract, and then a summary. So just quickly, the local public contracts law, it governs all of the procurement of the county, depending on what is required. There's various procurement methods that we can use. The purchasing agent, myself, are responsible for ensuring compliance with the law. The thing I'm going to focus on here, because it's the primary procurement method used by the Human Services Department to either give out grants or award contracts for various social service programs, is what the law calls competitive contracting. It's commonly known as request for proposals, which I'm sure many of you have responded to in the past. So the first thing that's going to happen is the purchasing agent is going to issue a notice to bidders. And basically what that is it's a publication in the newspaper that advertises whatever it is the county is looking, whatever services the county is looking to award a contract for. That's the first step. Requests for proposals have to be advertised for a minimum of 20 days. So from the day we issue the notice to the bidders, the earliest we could award a contract is, or open bids is 20 days from that day. So you would theoretically have about 3 weeks to put together your bid proposal and other things that you need to do to respond. I would encourage everyone to go to PassaiCbids.com. That's our main procurement page. It has all of the previously awarded opportunities, so you can look at how other people have responded to various bid opportunities with the county. You can see all of the pending opportunities, and you can also sign up for email notifications, which will let you know what bids are being advertised, so you're not missing anything. I would say that even if you're signed up for the email notifications, visit the page and track it, because sometimes we've had issues with the emails. And this is a place where you can actually download the bid packages as well, so that you get all the information on the things you need to do to submit a legally compliant bid. So what is required to qualify for a contract? This is a lot of various documents that you all need to sign and in some cases get notarized that need to be included with your bid for you to be eligible. So the four very important ones are the acknowledgement and receipt of addenda. This is a form that, in some instances, we will put out an RFP and there'll be a lot of questions and there'll be a lot of similar questions. So what we'll do is issue what's called an addenda. The addenda will try and clarify, either the questions or exactly what it is we're looking for, so that people can submit bids that accomplish what the county is looking for. If there's no addendas, it's less important, but if there is, it'll list the addenda and then you sign underneath. A statement of corporate ownership. This is basically a form that tells us, in your cases, you're a lot of nonprofits, but it tells us your corporate structure. The proposal, which we'll talk about more in the next slide. A standard questionnaire, which is a document that gives us references on other types of work that you've done in whatever it is we're looking to procure. And then the other three, the business registration certificate, that's something you have to get through the state. A Form W-9, which is an internal requirement for if you're awarded a contract when we have to pay you. It's a document we need. And a non-collusion affidavit, which basically says you didn't collude with anyone and try to break a bid or anything like that. So how is a contract awarded? The thing about competitive contracting is, unlike most goods and services like a construction project or something like that with the county, where we have to award to the lowest bidder, assuming that they are capable of doing the work. With the competitive contracting, it's actually scored. So in the RFP, in the scope of services, you'll see a methodology on how it's going to be scored based on these three criteria: management, technical, and cost. What happens is, under the law, the county has to convene a review committee. It's usually at least 3 people. And the review committee reads all of the proposals and scores them based on these 3 things. And then a memo is created. I'm giving you an example of a memo that Sherry and I did together for IT work, an IT company that the county contracted with. So you basically have to give, we have to give under the law various reasons why we're providing a score. We add them all up, and then we make a recommendation. I can tell you that with RFPs, we can award contracts up to 5 years and in any iteration of 5-year terms. So we could award a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options. We can award a 1-year contract with 4 one-year options. It just can't exceed 5 years. So this is after the bids are unsealed, they will come to our purchasing agent, and then they will get dispersed, and a review committee will be convened. They'll generate this memorandum, and then it goes to, in this case, the Health and Human Services Committee. So after it goes to the Health and Human Services Committee, which is sort of like, this is our the board's legislative process. We have various subcommittees, and then they make referrals to the board, and it gets put on an agenda. Francine or whoever is the project manager will take the review committee recommendation and present it to the Health and Human Services Committee commissioners, and let them know that they're recommending an award of contract based on the work of the review committee. After that, after assuming that the Health and Human Services Committee approves the recommendation of the review committee, it gets put on a board agenda and the commissioners vote on it. In most cases, the commissioners are going to take the advice of our professionals and our department heads. And then thereafter, my office is going to send you a contract incorporating everything that is in the scope of services and the bid documents, and all the other terms and conditions, which you would then authorize, and then work begins. Someone from the Human Services Department, whoever's managing whatever it is you were procured for, will reach out to you, and work will begin. One other thing I want to know, at our meeting on Tuesday night, the commissioners, under Commissioner James's leadership and Commissioner Best and a lot of other commissioners, established a minority and women-owned business enterprise program that's going to take effect at the beginning of next year. This is essentially a set-aside contract program that we're authorized to do under the local public contracts law, where a certain percent of our contracts will go to either women or minority-owned businesses. So it's something to be aware of. It's going to be another form that'll be included in the others I listed, and a certain percentage of the board's contracts are going to be set aside for these types of business enterprises. Like I said, that takes effect January 1. This is Sherry and my contact information. I would encourage anyone, if you have questions, even after this presentation is over, feel free to email us. Literally, we're dealing with procurement related things every day. It takes up a big bulk of my time, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions anyone may have, even after this is over, because at the end of the day, everyone understanding how this process works and submitting good bids and legally compliant bids, it makes all of our lives easier and better, and provides a better services for our residents, which is ultimately our goal. So feel free to email either one of us after this presentation if you have any questions. And then now, I don't know, Ron, are you gonna prompt up questions, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, we have a Q&A box in the bottom of your screen. Just type in your questions. And if you're not sure where that is, you can use the chat as well. We'll give it another minute. We have 0 questions right now.
I don't know, that's good or bad. Yes, the PowerPoint will be available.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions coming in, but I do encourage, if there are questions for Matt or Sherry, please reach out to them by the email addresses that Matt gave you on the slide. Matt, I'd really like to thank you so much for that presentation. Oh, another question just popped up. Hang on.
I think they're asking what types of RFPs. I think that's really more your area.
Okay, yes, I will be covering that in my portion of the program.
But I do encourage everyone, go to PasaicBids.com. It's a great website. There's a lot of information, and it'll make sure that everything that any types of contracts we're looking to award. So.
Thank you, Matt. I made you host, Francine, if you would like to share your video.
All right, thank you, everyone.
All right, here I am. So good morning, everybody. I am so grateful that you all chose to be here with us this morning for this. As Commissioner mentioned, this is really important to us to make sure we're getting information out to you guys to help you guys know exactly how to apply for funding. I want to demystify this process and make it easy to partner with the agencies in the community. So Ron, do you want to start my slideshow, or do you want me to do it?
If you want, either way, and you have two questions on the Q&A. If you want to answer them while I pull it up, it's
Sure.
does the county use pre-qualified lists for professional services?
They do. They do that for professional services. And that's as much as I'm going to answer that one, because that is really more of a Matt question than a me question. And the second one is about PBCs. Again, I would encourage you to email that question to Matt as well. That's not something that is in my wheelhouse. I'm just waiting for Ron to start my slideshow, and we'll get started. As I said, this is to help demystify the process of applying for funding, grant funding from the county, and more specifically from the County Department of Human Services. So the next portion of this training will really talk about the kinds of grants that we receive from the state and the federal government, and how we plan for those grants, what are the restrictions on those grants, which will help you understand why we have to turn around and pass those restrictions back to you, the bidder or the provider, and then what the RFP actually looks like. And we're going to go through piece by piece how to actually apply for that funding. So Ron, you can go ahead to the next slide. So this is just a quick agenda, the topics I want to cover today, a little bit about our department and the funding streams and requirements of those funding streams, how we decide how we're going to use the funding as well. I want to talk about some of those processes and what those timeframes are. And then we're going to dig into what the RFP looks like, and specifically the important parts that I'm concerned with, which are the narrative for your project and the budget for your project. And then we'll end up with questions. You can continue to put questions in the Q&A as we go, and I'll address them at the end of the presentation. So moving on to the next slide, please. So Passaic County Department of Human Services, we are made up of 4 divisions, and in those divisions we have community services, which deals with things like housing and food programs, other programs that help folks who are having issues with income disparity and housing related issues, really. The next division is the mental health and addiction services. They provide services for children and adults who are in need of any place on the continuum of care, from prevention and early intervention on through treatment and recovery and support. For addiction and mental health services. The Juvenile Services Division works on sanctions and services to prevent kids from getting involved in the juvenile justice system. And once they are involved, they work with them to prevent further involvement, particularly to prevent them from getting involved with the adult system. So again, they work on the whole continuum from prevention through juvenile detention and probation and reentry back into the community. And the Workforce Development Board works with our One Stop to plan for connecting quality employers with quality employees, and what that involves in terms of working with the Department of Labor and helping folks to get adequate training and certifications to be able to take the jobs that will be fulfilling to them. Next slide, please. So the funding that we have comes from a variety of sources in our department. And this is important to understand before we dive into it, because without really understanding where the funding is coming from, you don't really get a sense of why certain dollars have to, have certain restrictions, why I have to report in HIMAS versus Empower versus LOS, forms. They're all different kinds of reporting requirements, and that is dictated to us by where we get our funding from. So one of the biggest grants that we have is transportation, social services, homeless case management. We also get funding for CSBG, peer grouping. Actually, this one is more of an overview slide. I'm going to actually, if you want to move into the next slide, because that digs a little bit more into these, some of them in detail. So for example, that transportation, social service, homeless, and intensive case management, and Code Blue, we get about $2.3 million annually from the State Division of Family Development. But it's very prescriptive what they tell us we have to spend it on. Some of it is earmarked for transportation, some of it is earmarked for Code Blue services, housing, intensive case management services, and therefore very specific populations, income eligible populations, and folks who are on TANF, which is Transitional Assistance to Needy Families, or SSI. So it's very restrictive in terms of who can be served under these dollars and the types of reporting that is required for these dollars. So when we put out a bid for these dollars, you'll see all of those requirements written into the specs of the RFP. Next slide, please. So Community Service Block Grant is another grant that we get from the state. This one comes from the Department of Community Affairs. It's a much smaller grant, as you could see. That's roughly $310,000 annually. That changes a little bit every year, but generally that's what it is. It says here the grant term is from October 1st to September 30th, but just a couple of days ago, we were renegotiating these terms with DCA, and we're going to be switching that over to January 1 renewal, because it makes it easier for us and for you to get everybody on the same time frame with a calendar year renewals when we can. And let's see, so these funds are aimed at folks who are in the community to provide or improve quality of life, generally speaking for low and moderate income families. The big caveat with these dollars is the requirement for input into Empower. And it's a very detailed database that every intake goes into. So it's not just a aggregate level of service report. Every individual person that's served gets reported into a database in the state system. And when we decide how we're going to put the funding out, what we're going to do with this $310,000, those plans actually have to get approved by the Department of Community Affairs. So we can't put those dollars out to you guys to be spent on programming until we get approval from NJDCA to do that. Next slide, please. Another grant that we have, and I just want to show you an example of the smaller grant. This is a personal assistance services program. This one's only $54,000. This usually goes out to just one program. So some of the other ones get divided up among many different services, many different programs. I'm going to explain that a little bit more later on when we dig into the RFP itself. But this, if there was an RFP coming out for the PASP program, you would see this would be one RFP for one service, and it would be just this program and nothing else with it. So this would be a nice simple one to apply for, as opposed to some of those more complex ones. And what this one provides is administrative support to a program that provides personal assistance services for adults with disabilities. And as I said, the full amount is usually given to one single agency in this particular case. Next slide, please. Okay, so this one, oh yes, so this is about the AREF funding. This is our Alcohol Education Rehabilitation Enforcement Fund. We get, this dollar amount changes as well annually, but for 2022, we're looking at about $1.1 million. And they require us to put up a county match. So when I apply for the funding, I have to go back to the county and ask for the county to put in, I'm going to say it's roughly a 12 or 13% match. So we have to come up with some funds to match out those dollars in order to draw them down. The requirements for this are very intense as well. We have to submit a 3-year county comprehensive plan where we analyze all the addiction data, utilization of services, and do some projections for what we expect to see. And then we try to develop service plans accordingly. And then those dollars will get split up into all the different services along that continuum that I mentioned earlier. So we have to do something for prevention, early intervention. We have to put funding towards treatment as well as recovery support services. So it'll be one RFP, and there may be 8 or even 10 different programs that you could apply for within that one RFP. And you'd be invited to apply for 1 or 2, or if you decided you wanted to apply for all 10, you could do that as well. Let's see, yes, that's, I just, before I move on, I want to make sure I cover everything I want to cover on each of these slides. So I think that's good. We can move on to the next slide. Thanks, Ron. Another grant that we get from the state comes from the Juvenile Justice Commission. And you can see this one is a little under $1 million. This one also requires a 3-year plan and annual updates to that plan. Again, they're asking us to analyze juvenile court admission data, juvenile detention admission data, and they're actually asking us to come up with plans that will move the needle on some of those numbers. So if we're reporting that we've got, say, 25 children in juvenile detention at one point, they're going to be asking us to come up with a plan how we can reduce those numbers, or what else we can do differently to get those numbers down a bit. So the programs that we develop in accordance with this plan, they're asking us to look at developing programs that will have an impact on the community we serve. And that's where those annual updates come in, because now they're asking us to report back. How did we do? Did we actually move the needle on some of those numbers? If not, can we reevaluate and do something different? And I will talk a little bit about that planning cycle as well coming up. And these plans have to get approved by the Juvenile Justice Commission, as well as the JJC, the Juvenile Juvenile Justice Commission, and that also goes through the Attorney General for final approval as well. And again, the services that we're providing here cross that continuum as well, and the state makes sure that we're following through with providing services across that entire continuum. Next slide, please. Okay, so I don't want to spend, the grants that we receive change from time to time. Some of the funding is just a 1 or a 2-year term. Some of them, it has other restrictions or requirements on it. So I just want to mention some of the other grants as really more examples, but understand that these things can change from time to time. Another grant that we get is the Juvenile Detention's Alternative Initiative. This one is planned for by the JDAI Council. That's roughly $120,000 annually. We also, because of COVID, we got a COVID-specific grant from DCA for Community Services Block Grant. So I mentioned the other one a little earlier, the $310,000 one. They gave us an additional $424,000, and you see that was a one-time allocation. We have about 2 years to spend that, and we're pretty far down the line with using up most of that funding at this point for COVID-related, COVID-specific programming. The Emergency Rental Assistance Programs 1 and 2. These are special dollars, again, COVID-related, that came to us directly from the United States Treasury Department. The two grants together add up to about $36 million. And this is specific to helping people to pay back rent, back utilities, legal services, and other ancillary services to prevent people from being evicted. And it has to be related to COVID-19. So if, we're still accepting applications for folks who need this program. We may see another round of RFPs coming out for those ancillary services next year. We're still in the planning for ERAP 2, Emergency Rental Assistance Program 2. For right now, we're pretty much committed out on the one, but we're looking at and still planning around the budget for ERAP 2. So we may be seeing some more RFPs there. Homeless Trust Fund is a special pot that we have available to us. This is funding that the county gets from real estate transfer fees. Again, the law is pretty clear. It has to be used for movement towards permanent housing. We can't put it into shelters or anything that's not permanent. We can't pay hotels for, code blue. None of that can happen. It has to be specifically towards development of permanent housing in one way, shape, or form. Excuse me a moment. So these grants will come out from time to time. There's no specific time frame on these grants. When our Continuum of Care Committee sees a need, you may see a special program or a special RFP come out to create something with the dollars that we have available in this homeless trust. Innovation Grant was another special grant. We got a 2-year grant from New Jersey Division of Mental Health and Addiction Services. And this is special funding to support our mobile recovery unit, also known as our Hope One van. You may be familiar with that. If not, I'll be happy to talk with you about it at some point. So these are just examples. As I said, we can get new grants at any moment, and we'll respond to those and put them out to RFP as appropriate as they come in. Ron, next slide, please. All right, so some of the other funding. So up until now, I've been talking about money we get either from the state or federal government. This slide just lets you know, we also have the county commissioners give us funding that we can use for programming and services as well. And I broke them out into categories. The Mental Health Board gets some funding. The Human Services Advisory Council gets some dollars. Our Continuum of Care has some planning money available to it. We have a peer grouping grant, which is a really weird name of, but it's required by law. And it's essentially set up to help prevent folks from going into long-term care settings. And the county commission has also put some funding towards juvenile services as well, our home detention program, and some funding, and actually our programs, our shared services agreement with Essex County for juvenile detention. Several years ago, Passaic County closed its juvenile detention center, and we went into a shared services agreement with Essex County to house our juveniles in their juvenile detention center as needed. Let's see. So we can, these also would be going out to RFP at different times. Let's see. All right, next slide, please, Ron. Thanks. All right, so this is that needs assessment and planning cycle. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. It's a very, basic cycle. Everybody uses it. It starts with that data collection. We analyze what we're seeing in the data, and based on that, we plan and decide how we're going to use funding. Moving on into implementation of that plan, that's where the RFPs come in. And then there's the evaluation. And the evaluation is going to come in a few different parts. Your levels of service, you're going to send us levels of service reports, tell us how many folks you're serving. We're also going to be asking you to write measurable objectives. I'll talk a little bit more detail about that when we get into the meat of the RFP as well. But you're going to evaluate the services that you're providing and let us know if we're meeting the mark or not. And then that information goes back into, cycled back into how we move forward. And we decide, is this working, not working, and feeds the information that we continue to collect and analyze and replan and implement. It's an ongoing cycle to hopefully improve the services that we're providing in the community. And in this process, we want to be your partner, but when I train monitors to go out and do monitoring of programs, one of the things I say to them is, we are not here to do the big aha or I got you. We're here, we're successful when you're successful. And so we're here to work with you to help you provide the best quality services to meet the residents' needs in the community. And that's not just doublespeak. That really is, we want to make sure that the folks who live here, who need programs, are getting good services. So we want to work with you to make that happen, which is the whole point of why we're having this training today. We want to make sure that we're getting good quality agencies applying for good quality programs going forward. And the timing of this is not by mistake too. We're getting ready to release some new RFPs. So we want to make sure that you guys are ready to respond to those. Okay, so next slide, please. This one, yeah, okay. So the most common question I get is, when are your RFPs coming out? So the simple answer to that is, it depends. The fall is the most likely time you're going to see RFPs because most of our funding is on a calendar year. But there is a lot of variability to that. Some of our multi-year RFPs, actually, Matt alluded to this before. He talked about the opportunity to go up to 5 years. Because the funding that we get from the county and the funding that we get from the state is only 1 year at a time, we always do 1 year, options, 1 year options at a time. So when we release an RFP, we'll say funding is available from January 1st to December 31st, with the option of 2 1-year renewals, 3 1-year renewals, up to 4 1-year renewals we can do. That just means that you get one grant for 1 year. So the coming year, you'll get that contract. Depending if that grant is renewed again next year, and if all evaluations and everything stays the same, and we're moving in the right direction, you're very likely to get that renewed again next year without having to go back out for another RFP. You're not guaranteed it. So that is the other side of that. I can't guarantee you're gonna, if you get funding in 2022, I can't guarantee you're gonna have that same funding again in 2023. But as long as the funding is there and the program is operating well, there's no reason to doubt that it wouldn't be renewed again. if I have those 1-year options built into the RFP. The law is very specific. We do have to build those 1-year options into the RFP. So if the RFP is released and it only says 1-year contract and that's it, I can't give you a 1-year option. I just simply can't do it. But if I put out an RFP and I try to include that in all of our RFPs, where I said, the funding is January to December with 2 1-year options. That tells me, and that tells you, that for the next 2 years, we can give you an extension on that contract to continue to provide that service for another 2 years. Let's see. Oh, so some of these programs, not many, but there are a small number of programs that do operate on a fiscal year renewal. So there could be an additional release of spring RFPs from time to time as well. Sometimes if a program is not performing or is not able to meet their levels of service, we're not going to go in and just take your money. We're going to meet with you. We're going to talk with you. We'll see what other options we have. But if there's not an opportunity to do anything else, we may reduce the contract. And if that's the case, we may have to issue a special RFP at some point mid-year so that we can award the balance of that funding to a new provider. Sometimes, as you saw on a previous slide, we get new funding or new initiatives come in, and those RFPs can be released any time of year. Let's see, was there something else I wanted? There was. No, I think that's all I needed on that one. All right, we can move on. All right, so now we're going to dig into what the RFP is. I'm hoping that, I'm assuming that some of you have seen our RFPs and some of you are brand new. Matt mentioned that Passaic Bids website. Please absolutely go to that website, sign up for it. There's a few reasons for that. One is you'll get notified, but definitely, as he also mentioned, don't rely on that alone. Check the website from time to time. We try to maintain a database of email addresses. So when we know we're releasing things, we'll send it out to you guys as well. So if you're not on our mailing list, well, that's one of the reasons why we asked everybody to register for this training, so that we'll have your email addresses so we can notify you when new RFPs go out. Next slide, please. So this, before I even dig into the anatomy of the RFP, this is absolutely so important. That's why it was important that Matthew went before me. I just want to, I highlight these as probably some of the most important things you can do when you're applying for county funding. Sign in to the website and download the documents. If you sign in, you will be notified of addenda. Matt mentioned the addenda. One of the requirements is if there's an addenda, you have to sign off on a form and submit that back with your RFP that you acknowledge that you received the addenda. Sometimes I see providers, they don't download their RFPs directly. They have a third party get the RFP from the website and provide it to them. So they're not on the mailing list now. They're not getting notified of the addenda. So now you have that third party give you the RFP. You're not aware of the addenda. You can't sign off that you received the addenda, and your bid may be rejected because of that. So please, please, please sign in and download your documents directly. Don't rely on a third party to do it for you. Follow the checklist and include all of the required attachments. Make sure you secure signatures. There is one form that needs a notary. Have somebody else double check and triple check that to make sure everything is included. I have been at bid openings and I've watched with a broken heart as bids were rejected because something was missing. Please don't let that be you. You put in a lot of work to write your proposal. I want it to land on my desk so I can read it. If it gets rejected at this point, I never even get to read your proposal. Please pay close attention to those timeframes and due dates. If you've ever attended a pre-bid meeting with me, you probably have heard these stories I'm about to say, so I apologize in advance, but they're so important because they're great, great examples of what could go wrong. And I'm going way back to, gosh, what was it? Hurricane Irene, I think it was, when all the bridges in Patterson were closed. And we had a bid opening that morning, and a provider just could not get to the procurement department in time to drop off their proposal. They got there maybe 15, 20 minutes late. Once that due date and time comes, they shut the doors, they won't let you in. So they did all that work, got there a few minutes late, 10, 15, 20 minutes late maybe, and their bid was rejected, and it broke my heart to see that happen. So I encourage people to mail them in ahead of time, drive them in ahead of time. The second story I want to mention too happened much more recently, actually, was during COVID. You know, our bid openings were online. You download the documents online. Our pre-bid meeting was all Zoom. So everything was virtual. I think the provider assumed that the submission was virtual as well, and they could submit online. And so on the morning of the bid opening, the provider's online looking for a submit button and couldn't find it because there isn't one. It has to be hand delivered or driven in. We need paper copies of your proposal actually to land in the procurement department. So again, we had a provider who had done all that work, and I never got to read that proposal because it was rejected. It didn't make it on time. So please pay attention to the submission guidelines, the instructions. The other thing that I really encourage you to do is attend the bidders conference. This is really important as well. It's not required. I know the state can have mandatory bidders conference. That local public contracts law that Matthew referenced earlier does not allow counties to hold a mandatory bidders conference. But in most cases, I hold bidders conferences for all of the projects because so many of the projects that we put out to bid are very complex. So we try to hold these bidders conferences in advance of the submission deadline early enough so that if there are questions that need to be answered, they can come out as an addenda, and everybody who downloads it will get the answers to those questions. So please do attend the bidders conference. If you have questions, please try to ask them early in the process. The reason is, and I thought Matthew would cover this, but I'm going to because I don't think he mentioned it. For the addenda, there's a cutoff date that they have to have those addendas out to folks. And if we send out an addenda too late in the process, we would actually have to change our deadline, our deadline for the proposals to be sent back in, which causes us problems because we try to back those deadlines into when we know the commissioners' meeting dates are, so that we can get everything done on a certain time frame. So if we have to push back the deadline, that would push back when I can get that award actually approved by the commissioners and the award actually awarded to your agency. So ask the questions early so we don't miss that cutoff for addenda if there has to be addenda at any point during the process. Yeah, and then finally, I mentioned it already, but please plan ahead. Try to get your proposals in early. I hate to see proposals rejected because of missed deadlines or missed paperwork. Next slide, please. All right, just a couple of things about your proposal. I think there's really two things that you have to think about when you're writing your narrative. One is to write to your audience, and then the other is, I know it's silly, write it like you're writing a term paper. You know, there's steps, there's questions that that's asked, and just answer those questions as you go down. But for the first one, to write to your audience, Matt mentioned that proposal review committee. Generally, we'll assign 3 to 4 people to read and review and score the proposals. It will probably be made up of a division director here in our department, perhaps another staff member who's familiar with the programs. That could be a monitor, or it could be one of our coordinators. And then we'll bring in 1 or 2 other community members. Obviously not a community member who has applied for the funding, but it could be a member of one of our advisory boards, like the Human Services Advisory Committee or the Mental Health Board, the LACADA, which is the Addictions Advisory Board. We generally try to bring in community as well, so we get a balance of voices at the table. So as we're reading those proposals, the pages can get moved around, they can get, you know, separated. So just keep in mind, the folks who are reading the proposal, they want to be able to follow it along like it's a story and understand what it is you're trying to tell us. You know, we want to hear your good ideas. Please convey those good ideas to us in that proposal in a way that makes sense to us when we read it, and makes us excited and say, yes, we really want to fund this project. Next slide, please. All right, I'm assuming many of you have seen our proposals, our RFPs rather. And but for anybody who doesn't know what they look like, I pulled out a sample one that was done, gosh, about 2 years ago now. So obviously, for obvious reasons, I can't show you any that are coming up yet. You won't see those until they actually get it released. I can show you an old one. So this is an old one from a couple years ago. You know, the first page just has our basic information. The second page is the table of contents. You can see this entire package is 25 pages long, and that's just the request for proposal. Most of the stuff after like section, gosh, what is it? After section 3, yeah, from section 4 on, that's all the legal stuff. I'm concerned with here is section 1, 2, and 3. That's all my stuff. So that's what I'm going to dig into there is what's going on in sections 1, 2, and 3. All right, next slide. But before we get into sections 1, 2, and 3, you'll see the very next page after that table of contents is this checklist that I was referring to. Please pay attention to the document checklist. Make sure any of those required documents are included in your package. They're signed, they're notarized. I can't stress this enough. I can't stand to see proposals rejected because of missing documents. So please, 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 please double and triple check that stuff. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so the meat of my proposal here is going to be the scope of work. This is the section that tells you everything you need to know, including the things like who's eligible to apply, any licensing, target populations, and so on and so forth. And then, you know, top of the list there is projects for which proposals are being solicited. I'm going to take you back to an earlier slide where we talked about the SSH dollars, the $2.3 million pot. In that case, there could be 10 or so different projects there. And then that PASP grant, where there's only going to be one project there. So this is where you'll see those projects laid out in this projects for which proposals are being solicited. So each project is going to be separated and described individually in this section. It could even have specific target populations. It'll have specific reporting requirements if there are any. It may include things like a minimum expected level of service, And it will definitely have a dollar amount for it as well. So out of that $2.3 million, for example, we may say we're putting $50,000 towards a case management program. And so, you know, if you want to apply for that case management program, your dollar amount is 50,000 of that 2.3 million total that may be available in that particular RFP. And you'll see several different projects, and you can apply for one of those, you can apply for two, you can apply for all 20 of them if you choose to. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how you do that when we get to the narrative portion of it. Let's see, I just want to see if there's anything else. Oh yeah, there's also going to be a description there about what other requirements there may be. I mentioned the Empower before. Our juvenile programs are required to report into a electronic system called JAMS. Some of our homeless programs are required to report in a system called HIMIS. So whatever those reporting requirements are, that'll be laid out in the RFP as well, because it's implied. Actually, it's pretty explicitly stated. If you're applying for the funding, you are agreeing that you're going to report into whatever required reporting portals there are. So that's going to be a requirement for the funding if you're awarded that grant. Okay, move on to the next slide, please. All right. So then we move into the proposal contents themselves, also called the deliverables in the table of contents. So the very first page of your narrative is going to be this application cover form. Now, if you're applying for one project, we only need one of these with your narrative for that program. If you're applying for 3 or 4, however many, you're going to do a separate narrative and separate cover form for each proposal. You can include them all in one package, but they'll be look at them as different chapters of the full package. Each program you're going to apply for is going to have a application cover form and a narrative as well to it. This is basically everything that we need to know in a, at a glance kind of a thing. Gives us that little bit of a summary of what the program is. Very important on the top, the project title. We want to know which, especially in those multi-service RFPs, which project are you applying for? If we don't know which one you're applying for, we don't know how to score your project. We don't know how to count what you're looking to do there. So please make sure in that project title line there, you use the project title that was listed on the RFP. So if it says case management for children ages 3 to 3.5, then use that as your project title, case management for children ages 3 to 3.5. Don't use the name of your program there. Use our project title there so we know what you're applying for. On the bottom is very important as well. We want to know who to contact when you're awarded your bid. Who do we call to congratulate? So let us know how to get a hold of you. And all of that is right here. That's why this is my simple 1-page at a glance, everything I need to know page. Next slide, please. I really hope I'm not going too fast. So the deliverables here, I'm going to talk a little bit about the narrative itself. Again, think about your audience. Number the pages of your narrative, because pages do sometimes get separated in the review process. Some people will like to look at the document online. Some people like to print it out and separate it and pull it apart, and then they don't know how it goes back together again. So make sure you number your pages and include your agency name and that project name in the header on top of every page, so we know we don't want your page, your narrative getting mixed up with another agency's narrative. So we can keep your stuff together if it's numbered and logical and orderly. Use the numbering and the lettering that's used in the RFP. So I mentioned before about there's a sequence of questions we're asking you to answer. So, you know, if the first question, you know, is describe your agency. Number one, describe your agency. You know, number one, describe your agency, you know, and follow along that. So we'll know where to find the answers that we're looking for as we go through scoring the RFP. It just makes it easier for the review committee to find what they're looking for if you organize your narrative the way it's set up in the RFP itself. Please try to be as detailed as possible. Sell us this program, you know, tell us what you want to do, get us excited about funding your program. And that's I think that more than anything else will get you some success there. Tell us about your success too. Put your best foot forward. Tell us what you've done well in the community already. Tell us why you're good at doing this particular program. And, you know, include data, particularly if you're looking to solve a problem. Tell us what you know about that problem you're trying to solve. Let's see, I had some examples here I wanted to cover. Oh yeah, so some of the questions in those prompts may not be applicable for all the projects. I think of the mental health and the addictions programs particularly. If you remember, I said we cover a continuum of care. And some of that is treatment, and some of that is prevention services. And so they're not going to be asking the same kind of questions for those types of programs. But we try to keep it as broad as possible. So if I'm asking about agency licensing, that's really for a clinical program. And if you're providing a parenting education program, that wouldn't be a clinical license of any sort, that just would not be applicable. So just be aware that not all prompts in the narrative are applicable to every particular possible agency that could be applying, or every particular type. So use those prompts more as a guide than an exact have to answer every single question. Another good example would be we get this a lot, programs that we're looking for to do, say, drug and alcohol evaluation. One of the prompts may be, what's your discharge criteria? Well, if you're only doing drug and alcohol evaluations, you're not really intaking and discharging clients. So that wouldn't necessarily be, a prompt that you would have to answer, or it really wouldn't make sense for your program. So just answer the questions that are most applicable to your program. And again, if you're not sure, it is best to ask. So please, you are allowed to ask questions through the process. The questions have to go through the purchasing department. You're not asking me directly or the division director directly. You send your questions into the purchasing department. They send your questions back to me. We answer your questions and get them back. Most questions can be answered pretty quickly and simply. Most questions don't require an addenda. But sometimes they do. That's why I ask you to get questions in early if you can. And again, most importantly, sell your program to us. We want to, tell us why it's great. Tell us why this is the next great idea that we want to fund. Okay, next slide, please. Goals and objectives. Okay. So in the goals and objectives, this is probably, I think, everybody's worst favorite part of the process is, well, no, maybe second worst favorite. Where do we get to budget? But this may be every one of people's least favorite parts of the project is giving us your goals and objectives. Keep it simple. In the goals and objectives, we're looking for very simple things. I guess most importantly is measurable objectives. And I'm going to go into some examples of that as well. And how you're going to evaluate those objectives. Measurable here is the key. Measurable objectives. Remember, that's something that can be counted. I don't want to oversimplify it, but it really is just something that can be counted. So if you're going to, improve somebody's mental health, that's not necessarily something that can be counted, but you're going to have somebody attend X number of groups or what, that is more of something that can be counted. So those are more examples of clinical, not necessarily programmatic goals and objectives, but I want you to start thinking about how you can measure the objectives, how you're going to evaluate them. They're going to be yours. These are your objectives. Use data. Tell me what it is that you want to move the needle on. Tell me how you want to measure it. And when you want to measure it by. And then when we come out, when we monitor your program, we're going to be asking you, show us this, show us what you came up with. Where was your baseline data? How did you evaluate it? And where are you with getting to that measurable objective that you put into your project? Because these goals and objectives, when you're funded when your project gets funded, these measurable objectives will get moved directly into your contract. So we're going to ask you to perform on these objectives. Next slide. Okay, so I don't want to spend a whole lot of time here. There's lots of resources on the web to help you get to the place of writing these measurable objectives, but you don't have to do all these great lofty goals. You can do very simple things like, we're going to provide 20 parenting education classes. We're going, so that's a measurable objective. We're not looking for huge, big, earth-changing goals. We're looking for simple things, the little things that you're going to do to make improvements in the system. So this is just one place. SAMHSA has a website that you can go to for some fact sheets and for some assistance on writing measurable objectives. Not something I'm going to train on. I'm just going to point you in the direction where you can get some information on that if you want to learn some more about that. Next slide, please. Okay. And yeah, this is where I had, I just wanted to give one example, and actually this one I pulled right off of SAMHSA's website. Continue to educate community suicide is a public health problem. That's a great, idea. Definitely something that I would, say is a wonderful thing to accomplish, but you can't count that. You can't measure that. Then you look over here. How are we going to do that? We're going to do the 5Ks. We're going to have the 9 community meetings from this time to this time. So this is much more measurable. And then when we come out and monitor your program, we're going to ask you to talk to us a little bit about that and show us what you've done to achieve those goals. Again, we're not looking for, earth-changing goals here. We're looking for simple things that we can come out and count when we come there. And definitely levels of service can be counted as measurable goals, numbers of people that you're going to serve during a period of time. That is absolutely measurable goals. Okay, next slide. Now we get to the most fun part of the project, and that's our budget. I'm hoping that most of you are familiar with how Excel works, but I'm going to give you, I'm not going to go through all the pages of our budget. As you could see down on the bottom here, there are tabs, and each of these tabs work together in the spreadsheet. Let's see. This is the summary. Actually, this isn't the summary page. This is the contract form. Generally not so applicable for a proposal, although we include it because it is one of the pages. This is actually something when you're awarded your contract, our staff are going to fill out here. We're going to tell you what the source is that you're getting. and this would basically be your program here. The dollar amount there, the column number, and I'll show you what I mean when we go to the summary page. The column number that your program is going to appear in. And then the type of contract that is. Basically, generally speaking, we're either doing a fee-for-service contract or a deficit cost contract. A deficit cost contract means that you balance bill us for the cost of this program to your agency. And that's how this spreadsheet works, is a deficit cost contract. Again, this is for contracting purposes, this form. And then once you're contracted, you would fill out who your budget contact person is and phone number here. This is the page you sign to make your contract binding. So at least the budget portion of it. So I'm showing this page to you because it's part of our budget package that we're asking you to fill out for your proposal. But it's really, this is a contract form, not a budget and not a proposal form. So next page is really where the proposal goes to. So let's start, go to the next slide, please, Ron. Okay, so this is the summary of the budget. This is where you get to fill in here. These blue parts here, so this spreadsheet is locked too, and it's done that way for a variety of reasons. But this is the page here, the summary page, where you can fill in information about your program. So I typed in sample agency here just so you can see it, and that will show up on all the other pages. Your contract here, so you can complete all of this. In this case, and this is why I highlighted this in the snapshot, you could put a little X here where it says proposal budget, and you can, this will be your proposal budget. When you're funded, you're going to redo or resubmit it, and it'll be checked here for contract budget instead. Your contract period would be listed here. I mentioned earlier about the columns. The first available column for your project is right here, column number 4. So for now, we're going to skip column 1, 2, and 3. I'll get back to that. Your program goes right here in column number 4. Other than filling in the title and the year here, you're not filling in these numbers on this summary page. These numbers will come in from everything you enter on all these other tabs. And what will happen is you're going to enter on these tabs, you'll enter all your personnel costs, and the full total cost will show up on this line. On down the line, all of these costs will show up on all these lines. There is a revenue tab, your revenue, and that doesn't mean the funding you're getting from the county. That means other revenue you have to support this project. So this program may be a $1 million program and you're only getting 50,000 of it from the county. That's where these other columns come in, and that's where your other revenues come in. So you'll show your revenues here. So all this will add up to your total cost here. Any revenues you have will get subtracted from it here. And then your net cost, line L, net cost, that's how much you're asking from the county. So this line L here should be the total amount of money that you're asking the county to provide for your program. In some cases, you may have other grants, and that's where you'll be showing other costs for other things here as well. But generally speaking, especially for your proposal, stick with column 4 and forward. And again, when I mentioned earlier that you can apply for more than one project, while I want separate narratives for each project that you're applying for, you can use each column here and submit one budget. So you're applying to do that case management program. That case management program will be here. And you're going to do the drug and alcohol program. That one will be here. And then you're going to do an aftercare program. That one would show up here. Each one will have its own column, and they'll all be developed here across. I know I'm kind of broad stroking this, and there's a whole lot of depth to it, but I want to make sure I'm covering it okay. Ron, move over to the next slide, because I want to give what that looks like on the personnel budget. I didn't print out every single tab here. Oh no, I didn't even do the personnel budget. All right, never mind. So this is the levels of service budget piece. This is the very last page in here. Again, using that column 4 for your program, you're going to tell us what your expected levels of services are going to be here in this. Go back, if you can, to the summary page again, because I want to make sure. I'm sorry. I thought I used the sample personnel one as one, but each of these tabs, as you move on through the budget, you can enter information in there and it will all show up here on this summary page. All right. So we can move back, go forward again. Sorry, Ron. All right, yeah, I think I am ready for questions. I think I have pretty much covered. All right, so I'm looking at the questions. I'm gonna read them through and answer as we go. So the city of Clifton would like to get help with our homeless population. Are there any grants for that? Yes, Lauren, thank you for your question there. Let me see, we're looking at some Code Blue grants coming, I'm hoping. We're also looking at our Continuum of Care grants and Homeless Trust Fund. Lauren, if you're not already a part of the PCICH, the Passaic County Interagency Council on Homelessness, I would encourage you to attend and participate in that, because that is the group that does the planning of what grants will be going out for our homeless populations. So that's actually a great question to ask across all of the different program lines. We have several advisory boards, the Human Services Advisory Board, the PCICH I just mentioned, the Mental Health Board, the Addiction Board, and these are the groups that advise us and help us to plan for how dollars get spent in the community. So if you'd like to be a part of those conversations, reach out to our staff. The next couple of slides after we're done with questions is going to be our contact information. We welcome your participation in any of these boards, either as a full member or as a member of the public. They're all open to the public as well. And we welcome and invite you to come out and meet with us and let us know what those issues are in the community, because that all helps us to make better decisions about how we spend the money. So Elaine, you asked about the collective impact funding falling under CSBG funding. So collective impact, as you know, is a new initiative that has been started with, it's basically a government and community partnership, private-public partnership. We're trying to support it, and we've been trying to support it with grant funding from our office. So the short answer is yes, but it's not just CSBG funding. Some of that has come from the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. Some of that has come from the CSBG COVID funding. Some of it has come from the even some of the SSH funding. So we look to braid funding together often to create the most impactful programs that we can. So sometimes that means pulling together different funding sources to make, to make that magic happen. Let's see, who usually gets funding under the AEREF? how many are usually available? So that's another great question. The AREF, again, is the Alcohol Education Recovery Fund. That is the funding that's available for programs in the community to provide addiction services across the continuum. That funding is, we're expecting to do another round of RFPs for that funding again this year. The interesting thing with the dollars there is in the past, we had to support a lot of extra clinical services with that. With the expansion of Medicaid in the last few years, there's been less of a need for the clinical services. So it's exciting to say that we're able to do a lot more supportive services with that than we've ever been able to do before. Even detox never used to be covered by Medicaid. Now it is. So we don't have to put a lot of county dollars towards things, a lot of these dollars rather, towards things like detox. We can do a lot more creative, innovative prevention and recovery support programming with that. In terms of how many programs will be going out under that, I'm not exactly sure. Let me see, I'm going to say we're funding in total the County Department of Human Services contracts with roughly 70 or so providers for different programs. So we've got a wide field of programs for that particular grant. I'd say at least 10 different providers are getting funding under that particular grant right now. And as I said, I'm expecting to do another round of RFPs for that funding coming up soon. How do clients, residents apply for the U.S. Treasury funds? Ron, is there a way you can put that into the chat that all of the folks can see? The U.S. Treasury,
For the rental assistance program?
yeah, the ERAP. How do folks apply for ERAP?
Yeah, you go to impactpassaic.com and the application, you click on the top right where it says Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And I'll type the link in the question and answer portion.
Thanks, Ron. All right, can unspent funds at the end of a contract be extended to be utilized the following year? That's another great question. And that's a very big, that depends. Because let me give you some examples. The county dollars, more times than not, we may be able to extend for 2-3 months into the next year. The state dollars, we have to see if we're allowed to do that. JJC, for example, Juvenile Justice Commission, they do allow us to do that from time to time if we put in our request early enough. Let me see some of the other ones. CSBG has allowed us to do that from time to time. The AREF, they generally do not allow us to do that. SSH usually does not allow us to do that. So once that year ends, there's a hard cutoff, December 31st, and that's it. So it depends on the grant itself, whether or not we're allowed to extend it or not. But even if we are allowed to extend it, we have to get that permission from the state, our funding source. We can't just do it without getting approval from the funding source. Okay, Marie asked if we believe we are victims of possible political patronage or kickback schemes, who should we contact? Matt Jordan. Matt Jordan would be the one I would refer anybody to. If you're having any kind of issues like that, please reach out to Matt Jordan. He is county counsel for us, and he handles all of our legal issues. So without a doubt, that's where I would refer anything like that. Elaine asked, does the RFP refer to the funding source that will be used for the funding? And if it's a multi-year or single-year grant? Yes, I try to put as much of that information into the RFP itself. When we say how many dollars are available, we say, generally it's worded in a way that says $50,000 of SSH funding from Department of Human Services Division of Family Development. So we try to identify specifically where the grant source is. And we have to include the term of that funding. It has to be legally, I have to include that in there, otherwise I can't get my resolution past the commissioners. So it will include generally a 1-year grant. We're looking for the term of that grant, so it'll be January 1st to December 31st, if that's the case, or whatever the term would be. And if it's eligible for a 1-year extension, 2-year extension, or if there's no extensions available. There is, not to complicate things, but I just want to mention that there is in the contract language itself. So once you're funded in the contract language, we do have an option in your contract outside of the RFP process to extend your contract a little bit from that point, which goes back to an earlier question too. So if we do get an opportunity to extend past the contract year, there is language in your contract that says, yes, we can continue your contract for another 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. I think even as much as up to a year if we needed to, if there was, if the funding is still there. Okay, so that's Elaine. The next question here. When are the RFPs going to be available? So we are right now in the process of preparing RFPs for our SSH funding, our CSBG funding, our addiction funding, and mental health funding. So those are the next 4 that are coming out. And they will be coming, I'm telling you, stay tuned. It's a little bit of a tricky balance that we do. We can't release them too soon, especially if we don't have our award letters for them, because we're limited on how long we have before we actually have to award it. And I can't award it to you until we've had it awarded to us first. So there's a little bit of a tricky balancing that we're doing to make sure our timing lines up perfectly. But our goal is, as we're coming into November, I'm hoping to have RFPs, at least some of those RFPs issued in the next 2 weeks. And the rest of them probably, hopefully before the end of this month. So November is going to be a busy month. I'm hoping to get some RFPs out on the street this month. All right, Melody. Hi, Melody. To confirm if we are registered at the Passaic bids portal, we will receive notification of Human Services. Yes. You will receive notices from them if you are registered there. But that's why I send out emails as well as a backup to that, because I'm always worried that something, an email will be missed, or there may be a problem. I'm not sure. I want to make sure that that information gets out to everybody. So you should be getting your RFPs from the portal directly, but as a backup, we're going to be sending out information as well, just to make sure.
Just a comment on that, Francine. On Passaic bids, in your profile section, you have to make sure that notifications are turned on and your preferred method, it's email or fax. So make sure you choose email and have the correct email.
Yes, thanks, Ron. Okay, so would the peer grouping funding be a match for wellness, respite, and community wellness centers, mental health and addiction peer services with CSPNJ? The peer grouping is specific to preventing long-term, like, nursing home care. So if that's what you're doing in the wellness centers, that could be, that's why I mentioned the peer grouping is a bit of a weird name for that particular thing, because it's not what you would typically think of as like peer recovery or peer support, like through a wellness center or a recovery center or those kind of things. Peer grouping is specific for the prevention of institutionalization in nursing home for folks who are needing long-term care. Melody, again, if we are current grantees with options to renew, when will we receive our renewal package? Great question as well. I'm asking the division directors to get those renewal packages out to folks before the end of this month. We usually try to target getting those out during the month of November as well. A link to the portal to sign up. Lorenzo's asking for a link. Ron, can you post the link to that portal?
Yeah, I just did, and I'll put it on the chat as well.
Okay. All right, I see no more open questions. Are there,
Someone asked a question on the chat. Let me just pull it up here 1 second. It was Brenda, are startup programs able to apply for grants?
absolutely. That's the whole reason why we're having this. We're looking to get more of you involved. We're looking to, if you'll pardon a sports analogy, a little bit more depth on the bench. We want to get your ideas and you know, have a richer array of services available from a broader, as I mentioned, we have 70 or so programs and agencies that we're contracting with now. There's no limit to that. We can increase that. And we're really looking to get new players involved. Let me see, there was something else about, oh yes. The only thing I recommend is make sure you get your 501c3 or your business registry certificate. You're going to need something official in order to apply for and actually contract with us. So make sure you, even as a startup, you're getting all your official you know, documentation for your corporation. Yeah, so Ron is talking about, Ron, you want to mention about that account in Passaic Bids?
Passaic Bids will show you all the current bids, the bids that have been awarded in the past. However, if you want to get notified, you need to make sure that you actually create an account and set up your preferences and give your email, etc. So if you go to PasaicBids.com on the top right, you'll see it says create an account. I also added it in the chat for those that just want to click and really quickly create an account.
I'm not sure how long it'll take, but I do hope that we'll have this recording up on the website and we'll do a little Q&A, like a written supplement to it, the Q&A. The recording won't include the question and answers, but there'll be a written Q&A piece that goes along with the recording. And I'll give about another 2 or 3 minutes for questions. Other than that, I'm going to say thank you to everybody for sticking with me through this. Oh, Ron, advance the slide again, please. Go to the contacts.
Okay, give me 1 second. Let me pull it up. I had closed it, so just 1 second.
That's, I can share it if you'd like. I have it open.
I have it now, but we have one more question while I pull it up.
Okay. All right, Melody, I have an account. Do I have to log in each time? There is no login button. Melody, you're asking, I gotta be honest with you. I don't know this portal well. This is purchasing's portal, not mine. if you got Sherry's email address off of the slides that Matt presented, those questions are actually probably best for Sherry. It's her portal. She manages that from her office. Okay, I see you have it. All right. But yeah, if you're having issues or questions about the portal, reach out to Sherry. I can't pronounce her last name. I'm sorry. But yeah, she's really great. She's very responsive, and she'll help you out with anything you need with the portal itself. Did
So
you want me to?
Francine, I have your slides here, but they do not have emails on them. But let me pull it up 1 second.
No, it's just yeah, it doesn't have email. I didn't put the email addresses on it. While you're doing that, I just want to, mention who we are, how we can.
There we go.
While you're doing that. So go to the slide before that real quick. This is how you contact us. I know I did not put the emails, but I will type my email into the chat real quick. And then just who we are is on the next slide. In terms of who to contact for which division. I just stuck my email address into the chat. We have one main number for the office, and that's that 973-881-2834. You call that number during business hours. It will be answered by a live person, and just ask for who you want and you'll get connected. Quick, simple, easy, and we're happy to help you through any of this and answer your questions at any point. So, we're here to help and support you. And like I said before, your success is our success. So we really, really need to partner with you, and we appreciate your partnership.
And on a last note, this is the county website. So everyone's email is on the county website. If you go to each department, it'll have the division director and their email right on the website. And I'll share that link on the chat.
Thanks, Ron. Thank you, Joelle. All right. Well, thank you all for attending, and please reach out if there's anything else you need.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.